the class.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
So I hope this finds you well. So today I want us to start with this topic on sensation and perception. And we see first, or we normally use our 5 common senses in order to communicate to our mind the condition of our surroundings. For example, you use your eyes to see something, but before your brain, or before you know that you have seen a bright thing or you have seen any color, it's the work of your senses first to capture that color and then send signal through the nerves to the brain for the brain to be able to interpret that signal and make it to a meaningful form. For you to be able to know that you have been hurt. Or are you able to hear me, James?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Or you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay. So today I want us to go through sensation and perception topic. And as I was saying, before you sense something, sensing comes in forms of seeing, sensing comes in form of touch. I'll have to unmute you. Yes, let me just unmute you for us to have a, because I think I'm hearing some background noise, a lot of background noise. So we can just, let me just, if in case you have any question or anything that you want to comment on as I talk, you can just unmute your mic. So as I was saying, before you sense something, sensing comes by use of the 5 common senses that you normally use: through eyes, through taste, through smelling, through touch. For you to be able to know that you've been hurt or you've been touched by someone, the part that have been hurt normally have some nerve endings. So those nerve endings will send a signal or message to the brain, and then the brain interpret or even analyze first and interpret that signal into a meaningful form for you to be able to know that part is hurting. So it's something that normally occur at a very fast rate, because signals are normally transferred at a very fast rate to the brain. So that's what I want us to see. And how can we use sensation and perception in psychology? Yes, so first let's define or see the meaning of the two, and then we can continue and see how we relate the two in psychology of communication, or how do we apply the two when we are applying psychology when in our communication to whoever that we are communicating to. So sensation is the process of receiving stimulus, energies, and signals from the external environment, encoding it in neural signals and sending the signals to the brain. So the stimulus are normally sent to the brain through neurons. The other name of nerves is neurons. So, and this information is in form of signal. So the brain now will go and do its analysis, do interpretation, and then send back a feedback signal to the organ that needs to do an action. For you to be able to withdraw your hand that is maybe hurting, or to remove your eyes, or to unfocus your eyes from the bright eye, or there may be a light that is too bright, you need signals from the brain. So the work of the neuron is to transport that signal to the brain. Then human beings, are endowed with 5 senses through which they are in contact with the environment. We can normally communicate to the environment through sense of touch, hearing, smell, taste, and sight. Then for perception, this refers to the process by which the brain selects, organizes, and interprets sensation. We also refer to all of this as analyzing the sensation or analyzing the signals. So the brain receives sensory information through the sensory process, analyzes this information, makes decisions, and commands the muscles of the body to action. It's not necessarily only the muscles. We also have organs. For example, if an organ if the heart needs to pump the blood at a very fast rate, it needs the brain to send that signal in order for the muscles of the heart to contract faster, or even to relax if in case you need to relax. So sensation and perception are important because they are our principal link to the outside world or the environment. What we know of reality depends largely on the information we gather through our senses. But remember, it's also the work of the brain to select. It doesn't always take all the signals coming from the external environment. For example, when you're in a class, you're able to focus yourself to the lecturer who is in front of you and ignore all other signals, even if you have a lot of sound nearby, or maybe other type of signals coming from the environment. It's the work of the brain to select some of these signals and work on those signals, or interpret those signals. Otherwise, if the brain was capturing all the signals coming from surrounding or from the surrounding or from the environment, then we'll be a confused guy. So it's the work of the brain to really select what signals comes through the neurons to the brain. So there are some factors that normally perception, the way we interpret things or the way we see things. For example, two of us can see a person. The way I will perceive this person, or my perception toward that person, will be different, or might be different, can be the same or might be different from another person's perception towards that individual. One person may perceive that individual as a very, but the other individual may perceive the person in terms of their personality. So it depends with various factors, or this perception, or how someone normally perceives things depends on different factors. So the first factor is our expectations. And this is one of the factors that normally affect our interpretation of a sensory stimulus or stimuli. Some people are unable to accurately assess a situation because of what we expect, what you did expect of someone, or what you did expect of a situation or an event can really affect how you perceive that situation or an event or a person. This is also known as perceptual set. If, for instance, we expect to see something gigantic, if we're expecting to see something that is very huge, but what is presented to us happen to be small, those things, we are likely to say that we are not shown the actual thing. So what you expected can really affect how you perceive the same event or situation or even an object. The second factor is perceptual context factor in perception. And other stimuli or present at the same time might also affect our interpretation of a situation. For example, imagine you're given a talk, or you're giving a talk, to a group of people. And beside your mastery of what you want to convey or the message, your appearance and mannerism will also determine the effectiveness of your performance. How you appear when, for example, you're addressing an audience, the dress, your facial expressions, your posture, how you present yourself can really interfere with the message. So you're kind of presenting different signals to the audience. So when two or more signals are presented at the same time, they might contradict each other, or they might cause a person to change their perception. For example, if you're not dressed in a casual, in a formal way, and you're dressing a formal audience. For example, you're in a conference, there is a way that you're supposed to dress when you are addressing a conference. So if you dress casually, people will focus more on what you've dressed and really not focus on what you're saying. Even if you're really a good public speaker, you might end up losing your audience because of these other stimuli that you're presenting to them. So some members of the group may miss the message because they will concentrate on your inappropriate dress, your dullness, maybe you're so boring in presentation, and so on. You can also give other examples. Then the third factor is motivational factor, which can also influence perception. For instance, we need food. We may perceive stones as edible. If we need food, for instance, you may perceive something that is not edible as edible. So children in need of security might perceive their parents as being an abnormal human being, such that they are very large, they are very stronger than other people, because they are motivated by the security aspect of their parents. So each and every child believes that their parents is a supernatural human being because they provide for them, they give them security. Whenever they need something, they're the one that normally provide for them. So this motivational factor can also change how we normally perceive things. So person in dire need of money might perceive a piece of paper removed from another person's pocket as money, and many other examples. So the motivational factor here normally also will interfere with the perception of a person. The number 4 factor is our experience with stimuli, which may be sharpened, or which may sharpen our perception of the same. A person who has been already exposed to using a gadget like a fridge might not mistake it for a cupboard because you're used to seeing the fridge, you're used to using the gadget, you're used to using an iron box. But for a person who have never seen that iron box, may perceive that iron box as something else, may perceive that fridge as something else. A person who have never seen a djembe may perceive a djembe as maybe a big spoon or something, because they have never seen that. But if you're used to seeing it, or you have a repeated stimuli of the same, or you have been receiving a repeated stimuli from the same, your experience with that stimuli, this normally sharpen your perception towards that thing. So experience with people's way of life, that is culture, may help a person relate with them more effectively than would otherwise have been the case. So experience here is also normally affects in one way or another the way we perceive things, or even situations or objects. Another factor, people interests, values, emotions, and so on may influence their perception of sensory stimuli. Your interest, your attitudes towards something, the values that you have event or situation or even a person may also interfere or influence the perception towards that stimuli. People differ in the way they perceive shape, depth, motion, color, events, and even situation. For example, when I see a red color, I see danger. Or maybe I perceive that a red color is associated to danger. Whenever I see the red color, even if the flowers that have been presented to me in red color, I'll perceive that flower as a danger sign. So your attitude, your beliefs, your interest will come and influence how you perceive things. If, for example, you believe that when you see an owl, as they used to believe, or some of us, we normally believe that even now, in your village, there is someone that will die in that village. That is your beliefs and stereotype that will also influence your perception. So some of these beliefs and perception and emotion are related to the culture of where someone comes from. So still those can also affect your perception towards a situation, an object, or a person. Then still under perception, we have nonverbal communication. And communication, and this involves communication that involves unspoken language, where we are using facial expressions, we are using gestures, we are using posture, we are using eye contact to communicate. But normally, these go hand in hand with spoken word or spoken language. We normally use the two concurrently, but in some cases, we are forced to use the nonverbal communication. And this nonverbal communication will portray the inner feelings, what you feel. The inner feelings are normally portrayed by this nonverbal communication, and they're usually revealed through 5 basic channels. We have through facial expressions, frowning, smiling, winking, eye contact. Are you gazing to a person? Are you staring at a person? Are you making it? Also can also you're staring, you're gazing, or you're paying attention to a person. Then body movement, the way you're moving your body. Are you moving your hands? For example, when you're there is a way that you can call someone through body movement. There is a way that you can use the body movement to communicate. Then posture. When you're communicating, what kind of posture are you using? Touching also, when you're handshaking someone, when you're tapping the shoulder of someone, what is that? You're still communicating to the individual. So facial expression reveals 6 basic emotions. You can reveal anger, you frown. You can reveal fear. You can reveal happiness. You can laugh, you can smile. You can reveal sadness. You can reveal even surprise as well as disgust. Then the meaning of facial expressions are influenced by culture, contextual, and situational factors. The context, the situation, the culture will influence the way you are using your facial expression, and they can be translated into an understandable cues or understandable form. Eye contact as a nonverbal cue can also have different meanings. For example, high level of gazing is often regarded as a sign of affection. The avoidance of eye contact may signify unfriendliness or bashfulness. You feel ashamed, you feel shy, you feel unfriendly to these individuals such that you're not even able to look at them. Then, or you're not willing to look at them. Then an exception to the idea that gazing is associated with affection is staring, which can be seen as a sign of hostility. When you stare to someone, or when you stare to, for example, to an individual or a child, there is a way that you can show hostility. When mothers, and this happens majority in motherhood, there is a way that a mother can look at a child and a child see that there is danger coming. So this is staring. So these facial expressions will have different meanings depending on the context, depending on the situation, as well as depending also on the culture someone comes from. So give me a minute. I attend to something. 1 minute. I'm coming back. So, other types of nonverbal communication include large number of body movements, which normally might suggest emotional arousal. When, for example, a lady who is feeling some shyness, and the gentleman who is talking to the lady might show some emotional arousal by moving a lot of her body parts. So then we have large patterns of body movements. We have patterns here and we have numbers here. Don't get confused. For large patterns can suggest contrasting emotions, such as threatening posture or welcoming with. When you're using different patterns, or when you're using different types of body movement, you can show, or this can signify some contrasting emotions. Then we have specific information about feeling is sometimes provided by gestures. Gestures fall into different categories, and the most important of which are emblems. And these are body movements which carry specific meaning within different cultures. So we can still use gestures to communicate and show different types of information. So specific gestures can have different meaning for men and women. Touching, for example, is another nonverbal channel that reveals our inner feelings. And the message it conveys depends on who does the touching and the nature of the contact and the context. So touching can either portray negative message or positive message, depending on the context. So when touching is judged inappropriate, it may elicit strong negative reactions. Appropriate touching is usually positive. One acceptable way of touching is handshaking, tapping on the shoulders. But if the touching is inappropriate, definitely it will elicit, or it will cause strong negative emotions. Then how do we recognize deception in nonverbal cues? So generally, we are not good at recognizing deception because we tend to perceive others as being truthful. We can use, or someone can use nonverbal cues to deceive you using the nonverbal cues. Majority of people do not recognize, or generally people do not recognize deception because we tend to perceive others as being truthful. So also we tend to be polite and do not give sufficient attention to nonverbal cues, except when people are in high belong. So in majority of cases, people do not pay much attention when someone is talking, or they do not pay much attention to the nonverbal communication way when someone is talking to them, because if the nonverbal is not going hand in hand with, or it's portraying a different message from what someone is saying, then that might be a deception, or that might not be true, or whatever they're saying using the word of mouth might not be true if whatever they are portraying using gestures, using this nonverbal cue, is not going hand in hand. For example, if someone is telling you of something that is positive, but their facial expression is different, maybe they're frown, they are showing some level of disgust, whatever that they're saying, then if you're not paying attention to their facial expression and their body movement, then you might be deceived. So they seem to be better at reading relevant nonverbal cues. Then we can tell when others are deceiving us by being on the lookout for certain nonverbal cues. For you to be able to know whether someone is deceiving you, you have to pay attention to what they're saying as well as to their nonverbal cues. What is their body language? Is their body language going concurrently with the words that they are using? Is the body language going against what they are doing or what they are saying? If, for example, someone wants to show some affection, which is really showing some other, maybe disgust or something, then you'll know that, and you pay attention to both, then you know that they are deceiving you. So it's really important that a person pays attention to the nonverbal cues. So the first of these are micro expressions or fleeting facial expression lasting only less than a second. For example, there is a way that a person will smile. If the smile takes less than a second, the smiling period is very short, then you know this smiling is not true, or whatever that they want to show me through the smile is not correct. Then others are inter-channel discrepancies, such as aspect of eye contact, exaggerated facial expressions, and raising voice or pitch. For example, if a person is not paying attention to you, but they're just gazing, they're just staring, their mind might not be present at that moment. They want to show you that they're paying attention by just looking at you. But if they're staring at you, then they might not be paying much attention to what they're saying. Then exaggerated facial expression, there is a way that a person can use an exaggerated smile. Then you'll know that these are not a genuine smile. There is a way that a person will talk to you. Maybe the message that they want to pass to you is a positive message, but they're using a very high voice pitch. Then you might definitely know that they're not true, or they are untrue in whatever that they want to show you. Then women have superior skills in sending and receiving nonverbal cues. And this might be a reflection of the roles and stereotype in society. However, men tend to be more susceptible to deception, or women tend to be more susceptible to deception than men. Even if they really know how to use these nonverbal cues, they can be easily deceived as compared to men, because they're not able to really pay much attention to the nonverbal cues. But for men, it's highly unlikely that they will be deceived by untrue nonverbal cues. Next subtopic, still under perception and sensation and perception, is attribution. And in order to understand why people, including ourselves, do what they do, we use a process known as attribution. We try to identify the cause of behavior and so gain knowledge of traits and dispositions. For us to be able to understand ourselves together with other people, or how for us to be able to ourselves well, and also we normally use attribution, or attribution is a process under which a person will understand himself or herself and also understand those that they interact with each and every day. We have theories that normally explains how we perceive ourselves and also we perceive other people. And the first theory is Herder theory of attribution. And Herder discussed a very simple dichotomy where making either internal or external attribution. So when a father, for example, had yelled at his son, we can make an external or an internal attribution depending on one person and the other. Okay, depending on what kind of a person you are. So for example, one person will use that yelling to determine the behavior of the father. The other person might use that yelling to find what caused or what situation led to the yelling. So one person will start to analyze the father using the yelling, disregarding what might have caused or the situation that might have caused the yelling to the son. But the other individual might first look at what is causing this yelling and then find the cause of the yelling. So we can make an internal attribution and decide that the father's behavior tells us something about himself. He has an aggressive personality or negative general disposition, or their internal personalities are very bad or it's negative. Or we may make an external attribution and decide that the cause of the father's behavior had something to do with the situation. So one individual will use that yelling to analyze the individual personality, and the other will look at what led to the yelling or what led to that event. So one might have been nearly hit by a car after running across a street without looking. So one person will look at the external attribution, will perceive this individual by looking what is causing the situation, while the other will look at the internal personality of this individual by using that situation. So if you make an internal attribution in this particular case, we will have a negative impression of the father. You'll end up hating that individual. But if you have a positive impression of him, we'll have a positive impression of him if we make what? An external attribution. So the very preferred case here is external attribution. Look at the surrounding or the situation that has led to a present event or a present situation, or what is leading to the occurrence of the present situation. The second theory is correspondent inference theory. And this theory explores how we use information about others' behavior to identify their stable traits or dispositions. How we use others' behavior to identify their personalities. So according to the theory, we focus on certain types of behavior which are likely to be most informative. You focus mostly on the behavior of a person in order to determine their inner personality, the stable traits and dispositions. So people try to deduce, these are freely chosen behaviors, non-common effects caused by one specific factor, but not by others, and behaviors grow in social desirability. So these are freely chosen behaviors, the non-common effects or the effects caused by one specific factor, and behaviors low in social desirability. So you choose some behaviors in a person that normally are in low social desirability, that are normally not really accepted by the society and determine the personality of this individual. So people try to deduce, to choose, or infer internal traits or disposition from observable behavior. So, sorry, I was saying, this theory uses or explores how we normally use or how we normally choose information. And information in this matter is behavior that someone portrays to us to determine their internal personality or their personality. So we use the behavior to interpret or to analyze the personality of this individual. But in this case, we are choosing the behavior, and especially the behavior that is not acceptable in the society that we are in. So the closer an inferred underlying trait or disposition truly represent the overt behavior in question, the greater the correspondence between the trait and the behavior. So the closer the behavior that you have chosen to analyze the personality of this person is to the real personality of this individual, and the greater that our answer will be correct, or the closer to the real personality. For example, if I see an individual maybe not wearing as how maybe my culture perceive appropriate dressing is, if I use that to analyze and interpret the personality of this individual, I might end up perceiving the personality of this individual, which is not correct. But if I look at other behaviors, for example, the positive behavior of this individual, I might come up with the best personality or the correct personality of this individual. Because, for example, the dressing that some people or all of us, we normally use dressing code to perceive the personality of an individual, but you might find the individual have a very good personality if you analyze this personality well, or if you you've analyzed this individual well, using many or using all the observable behavior that you that this individual portrays. But if you select the traits or characteristic of this individual that are not acceptable according to you or according to the society that you're living in, then you might not have good perception of the personality of this individual. So the characteristic that we have chosen to use are to the personality of this individual, then the closer to the correct personality of these individuals you be. So it's really good that we use a wide range of traits in order to perceive the individual well, using the right personality or their inner personality. Then the third theory is Kelly's theory of causal attribution, and it focuses on whether a behavior is by situational factor or personal factor. So for this theory, it will focus on to determine whether this behavior is caused by the situation where this individual is or is in, or the personal factors of this individual. So this depends on 3 types of information. Number 1 is consensus, the extent to which other persons react to some stimuli or event in a similar way. So the way you perceive a person, either in terms of situation or in terms of personality, will depend on 3 things. Number 1 is consensus, consistency, and distinction. Consensus is the extent to which other people react to some stimulus or event in a similar way. For example, if you're used to people when they see a cockroach, they're used to cockroach. Some come see cockroach. So the video to sense of physics. Be a and this is the extent to which an individual responds to a given stimuli or situation in the same way on different occasions. So, for example, if you're dealing with an individual who will react differently in different places, but in the same situation. For example, let me still use the same example I used up there, cockroaches. If, for example, you went to an old woman's house to find cockroaches, and this individual did not show any disgust or did not show any surprise or any fear, but you went to another woman who is not old and find cockroaches, but this individual shows a different perception or a different maybe facial expression. They are disgusted at this point or they get surprised at that point. Then you can use that to judge this individual, or you can use that to perceive the personality of this individual. Then distinctiveness, the extent to which an individual responds in a different manner to different stimuli or events. So the way a person will react towards different events or different situations, you can also use that to perceive that individual's personality. So the way a person will perceive another individual's personality will depend on whether the behavior is caused by a situation or personal factor. And this will also cause the difference in perception when you're dealing with different people. But this will depend on consensus, and this is the extent to which people react to stimuli or event in similar way. or the extent to which an individual responds to a given stimuli, that is consistency and the distinctiveness. For example, when you wrong a person, then the person gets angry. Really angry. And then all of a sudden, when this person experiences a positive situation and they get happy, then depending on how they will respond to different respond in a different manner to different situation, you can still use that to perceive this individual, or to you can use that to interpret how this individual's personality is. If this personality, or if this individual's personality doesn't change in different events, or they respond in an organized way, let me use organized way, in different events, then you can still use that to perceive the personality of these individuals, depending on how they respond to different events or to different situations. So this theory focuses more on the behavior caused by either situational factors or personal factors. Behaviors are caused by situational factors. Other behaviors are caused by personal factors. But this will depend on consensus, consistency, and distinctiveness. Then factors that make friends attribution. What are these factors that will influence how I perceive another person as well as perceive myself? Number one is augmenting, or the tendency to attach greater importance to a potential cause of behavior or behavior occurrence despite presence of other inhibitories. We have discounting, and this is the tendency to attach less importance to one potential cause of behavior when other potential causes are also present. So in augmenting, people tend to attach greater importance to potential causes of behavior. So the way you perceive me will be affected by two things, either augmenting or discounting. In augmenting, you are focusing more on the potential cause of the behavior, of my behavior. For example, the example I used on a man yelling to a son because a car was about to kick the boy off the road. So I focus on the cause of my behavior, or when you focus on the causes of the man, or the man yelling to the child, this will influence how you perceive that individual's personality. But if you don't focus on the potential cause of the yelling, even when potential cause is also, even when other potential causes are also present, then you might end up as that individual correctly. So you get aware do you do not focus on of behavior the village if they don't focus on what is really what is the cause of this inappropriate behavior. Maybe this child have been or have grown up in this way, have been dressed up in this way from the time they were very young to this age. If they don't focus on the causes of the dressing code of this individual and focus more on the dressing code, then they will perceive this individual in a different way or in a negative way, but they were supposed to perceive this individual in a positive way if they had augmented on the potential causes rather than discounting the potential causes of the dressing or the inappropriate dressing code of this individual.
You are currently the only person in this conference. You are currently the only person in this conference.
Issues, but we still manage. I'll still try and make sure that we go through this topic. So as I was saying before the internet was off, so there are basic sources of error of attribution, or there are some of the causes of us perceiving others incorrectly or in an incorrect way includes the following. So the first one is correspondence bias, also known as fundamental attribution. And this is the tendency to explain others' action disregarding or to explain other actions steering from disposition. We disregard the situation that led to this individual act the way they acted at a particular situation. So we disregard all that and we interpret their personality by use of what we saw, how they behave or how they behaved or the actions that they portrayed at that point. So the reason as to why this error occur is because, number one, we tend to focus more on the action of the individual rather than the situation that they are in. If you focus more on how the individual behaved in a particular situation, rather than not focusing on how or what caused the individual to behave in a particular manner, then you will end up having an error when you're interpreting the personality of this individual. Then the second one, we notice situational causes, but attribute insufficient weight to their importance. Sometimes you know the cause of someone behaving in a particular way, but you still don't want to give that situation more importance, or that cause more importance. You just want to focus more on the behavior rather than the cause of the behavior. Then number three reason is that we follow two-step attribution process, where we first consider an individual's underlying characteristics and only then take situational factors into account. First, you perceive this, or first you interpret the personality first, or you use the action or the behavior of that person and interpret first the personality of this individual, and then later try to look for the cause. Already you have compromised your answer or your correct interpretation of the personality of this individual if first you judge them by their action rather than looking at the cause first. So it's good that we first analyze the causes of a particular situation before we interpret the personality of an individual by use of the behavior. Another cause of error is actor-observer effect. And in this error, we attribute our own behavior to situational causes and the behavior of others to internal or dispositional causes. We are accurately aware of external factors affecting our own actions, but not so aware of external factors affecting the behaviors of others. So you see your own behavior as a result of a situation caused, but if a person was in the same similar situation and behave the same way you behaved, you're still judging them. There is some circumstances, or there's some people that do that. If you yell to this child who is doing a wrong thing, so you interpret that as appropriate because you're using it, because the situation under which you yelled at this individual caused you to yell. But if another person yells at this child, you will start to perceive this individual, you start to judge this individual depending on how they behaved against that child. But remember, they're behaving the same way you behaved in the same situation. But due to this actor-observer effect, you may end up having errors when you're perceiving the other individual. Then you have another cause of error, that is the self-serving bias. And in this error, we normally tend to attribute one's own positive outcomes to internal causes and negative outcomes to external causes. If, for example, you're acting in a positive manner, you use that outcome to perceive yourself as a good individual, to have a good personality. But if, for example, you end up misbehaving or portraying negative behavior or misbehavior, in short, you tend to explain your misbehavior, or you tend to portray that this misbehaving was caused by the situation that I was. For example, if you drink alcohol and start yelling around, start doing other things or bad things or inappropriate things, or portray inappropriate behavior, you might end up accusing the alcohol or using the alcohol as the cause of you misbehaving. But if, for example, you portrayed good personality aspects or good outcomes, then you use that good outcome to explain your personality. So you're using negative outcome, or you're using you're attributing the negative outcome as being caused by an external cause. And the same time, you're attributing your own positive outcomes to be as a result of internal causes or internal personality. That's how we normally are. We always look at blaming others or blaming the environment, blaming what is surrounding us if we are caught in an inappropriate situation or in doing an inappropriate thing. But when we behave good or we portray good personality or we portray good things or we portray good outcomes, we normally attribute that as a result of your own inner personality. So reasons for the self-serving bias may be of a cognitive, that is attribute success to internal causes, or motivational nature to protect and enhance our self-esteem. Yes. So the nature of the self-serving bias varies across cultures. The nature of these self-serving bias will differ depending on what culture an individual will come from. And these will differ depending on or from one individual to the other individuals. So we normally try to enhance our self-esteem by attributing our positive outcome as a result of our internal personality. So we motivate ourselves through the use of this self-serving bias. Otherwise, when you'd always be judging yourself negatively, even if you have good outcomes, maybe judging yourself, I'm acting this way because I want to be praised, I want to appear good, then your self-esteem will be low. Because if, for example, you want to motivate yourself to be a good person, do good things, you have to use the self-serving bias, or we normally use the self-serving bias in order to boost our self-esteem. But for a person who have low self-esteem, they will always have that. They will always blame themselves rather than blaming what is around them. So applications of this attribution theory or these attribution theories includes defensive attributions are those attributions we make when we notice that we are similar to someone who has experienced negative outcome. And this attribution might also explain the different attribution males and females tend to make in sexual harassment cases, where, for example, increasing males' awareness of their similarity to the victims of harassment, and this is making them aware that they themselves can also be harassed, may lead men to blame sexual harassment perpetrators more than they usually do. Because once a female is harassed, you'll find people blaming the individual rather than blaming the blaming the individual rather than blaming whoever caused the harassment. Because you'll find people saying that they were not dressed in an inappropriate way, they were inappropriately dressed, they seduced this individual, they want to hurt these individuals by accusing them that they are harassed, rather than looking at what really, or what really led to this harassment. And by that, they will blame these sexual harassment perpetrators rather than blaming these individuals or blaming this individual who is being harassed. So when you blame and you condemn those who normally harass children, harass adolescent children, harass even old people, then you'll be able to reduce this harassment. But when you always blame this harassment on these women, on these children, maybe you're blaming the parents of these children rather than blaming whoever that caused the harassment. Take, for instance, a child is raped. How can you explain that? If you blame the child raping, or if you blame the mother, did not take care of this child well, neglected the child, security or things like that, rather than blaming whoever that caused the raping, you will end up not solving the solution, or will not end up not having the cause of the rape. But when you blame whoever that caused this harassment or this rape or this even robbery, you'll be able to overcome the robbery. So we can apply these attribution theories in different situations in order to have solutions to different causes of behavior in our society. Then we have still sensation perception, impression formation, and impression management. So impression formation is the process through which we form impressions of others. We focus firstly on information pertaining to people's traits, values, principles, and only then on information regarding their competence. So the way or the impressions that you normally form the first instance you see an individual. For example, if you a doctor who is dressed like a doctor who is just dressed in rags, or a doctor who is not dressed in a formal way or in expensive clothes, because according to you, you know that doctors are normally paid well or professors are normally paid well. But when the professor comes to class and maybe you see this professor wearing second-hand clothes, so first impression is normally as a result of how people will read this individual or we perceive this individual depending on their traits, their values, and their principle. Then after maybe this professor starts to teach these individuals, then this individual, these students may come to know that this professor is very competent in whatever that they normally teach. So research shows that impressions of others involves two components. We have exemplars of traits or behavior, and this is concrete examples of their behavior, and abstraction of traits or behavior, and this is overall behavior in our dominant impression. So when people make judgment about others, they recall examples of their behavior and base their judgment on these two factors. So your first impression to an individual, to a person, So once you, for example, in a class, when you are in a class and a professor that have never taught you comes in, the way you perceive that professor by just looking at that professor, the way maybe they are dressed, the way they present themselves to you, the first thing that comes to your mind is impression, or you make some impression, you form some impression on who the professor is in terms of personality. But as you come to know or even to listen to this professor, you will have a more clear picture on more personality concerning this professor, as well as the competence of this professor or the competence level of this professor. For example, a professor can come with second-hand clothes in your class, dressed in a second-hand clothes. So you may perceive this professor, maybe they're not competent, they don't look to know what they really are supposed to teach you. So the impression that you normally form first is always not, majority of it is not correct. But as we come to understand more or interact more with these individuals, we tend to be, or we tend to understand this individual more as we interact more with this individual. So initially, our impressions are based on exemplars, that is concrete examples of their behavior. But as we know a person better, abstractions of their overall behavior is our dominant impression. So we have two things that normally affect or that normally influence impression formation. We have exemplar traits of behavior, and this is that concrete examples of their behavior. How do they, as you continue to know or continue to interact with this individual, the abstraction of traits or behavior comes that in order to interpret or analyze the personality of this individual. And this is the overall behavior, which is a dominant impression. So as you continue interacting with this individual, you'll be able to know the overall, or in average, or in whole, how do this individual, or who is this individual in terms of their personality. But at the first instant, you used maybe their physical appearance only to judge them or to interpret their personal or their personality. But as you continue to interact with this individual, you will come, or you will combine the way they dress, the way they talk, the way they address you, the way they present to you. So you're combining a lot of this behavior, of this individual's behavior to interpret the personality of this individual. So cognitively, we tend to put people we meet in large familiar social categories. So when you meet a person, you will say that these individuals are like the ones that are normally proud, the ones that are normally very rude, the rude people. But as you continue to know this individual, you will have, or you will base your impression depending on their personality. So we also base our impressions on what we think we know about the person belonging to these categories. But when we can focus more on people as individuals, not as category members, we'll know them better. When you focus more on these individuals, you interact with them, you'll be able to know them better and know their real personality. But at first, we normally categorize them in groups. This individual or this person is a rude person. Ni watu wenye wanakuanga wabaya, ni watu wenye wanakuanga rude. So we are categorizing this individual into a certain category of individuals. But as we continue to interact with this individual, you'll be able to really know the personality or the real personality of individuals or this individual as you continue interacting with them. So that will be the end of sensation and perception topic. So in sensation and perception topics, we are dealing with how do we perceive others and how do we perceive ourselves, and what are the factors that normally influence how we perceive whoever that we interact with, and also how do we perceive ourselves. So impressions when it comes to attribution and other factors will influence how we normally perceive people in different situations, in different circumstances. So that will be the end of today's lecture, unless you have any questions, James. So you can open your mic and ask any question, or you can just text, whichever that you want, or make any comment. So James, are you still there?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if a person is constantly in conflict with other people to the extent of these people starting to avoid him or her, and when he discovers this, he gets depressed. What kind of a help can you offer that person?
When this individual, the issue here is self-esteem. Because once a person has very low self-esteem, they will always blame themselves, even if the situation, even if, for example, they will not really speak out. They will always keep things to themselves. For example, if this individual is in a situation where they are being condemned, they will not be able to speak out. So you have to really work on the self-esteem of the individual. Because if a person have a good and high self-esteem, they're able to speak out. When someone makes them sad, wataweza kujielezea ama speak out or whatever they maybe in a better way. Because also self-esteem, low self-esteem can lead a person to have antisocial behavior, such that akikosewa anajua to respond to this individual. I'm supposed to either abuse this individual or even fight with this individual. But if I'm able to speak out, I'm able to express myself. If I'm able to express myself, I'll be able to express myself in such a way that the other person will not be hurt by what I'm saying. And by that, I'll not keep things to myself. Yes.
And how can you boost your self-esteem? Assume that one have a low self-esteem. How can you help such a person to boost his self-esteem?
How to help a person to boost their own self-esteem? First, and by understanding that they have low self-esteem, telling them or showing them how to express themselves. Mtu akikukosea, usikubali kunyamaza. Muonyeshe umekosea na amekukosea na umuonyeshe kwa nini amekukosea. If at all you hurt me in any way, I'm supposed to speak out. I'm supposed to show you that I'm hurt and make sure that you'll never hurt me again, because I'll explain to why are you hurting, or the way I'm hurting, the reason as to why you have really hurt me. For example, mtu anaweza kuambia kitu, but you're not happy with how they are responding to or how they're talking to you. But if you're able to tell them that they really need to change how they normally talk to you, then you're able to overcome another instant that the same will repeat itself. Otherwise, mtu akinyamaza, wengine wataendelea kuhurt this individual, and these individuals will be hurt in such a way that they will not be able even to talk to this individual, the other individual. That's why you see some people start to withdraw themselves from others, because they see others as maybe when I interact with the other individual, he always hurt me. But when you know that the other individual is hurting you and you're able to confront this individual in a better way, you'll be able to overcome and repetition of that in future.